I was just mowing along with the old 932. All of a sudden it started acting real funny. So I limped it back in front of the garage here. And I have some serious transmission fluid leaking. Granted, my seat's leaking too, but the problem is right there. I don't know what that is or what it's attached to. I think it might be a line, but it is just leaking a lot of fluid. So now we gotta figure out what's causing that leak. Here we are a bunch of months later. As you can see, I think when this failed, I think it was like August. Anyway, I got the mower deck off the machine, and that thing is easy to remove. I was super impressed with the design of this thing. Basically, just these pins go down through. There's 2 pins on each side, and the whole arm assembly comes right out of the machine. Awesome. And obviously, on the drive shaft, there's a quick connect. Thing slides right out. How cool is that? So anyway, the leak is back there on that line. So I've got to remove this cylinder so I can gain access in behind there. Then I'm just gonna make sure that leak is coming from that line right there before we go any further. Got that loose. So there you can see that leaking pretty good. The fluid looks red. Unfortunately, I really can't see inside that frame rail. But I'm assuming that line is this line back here. That goes all the way inside that frame rail to the front. But there's no real good way to see anything else inside that frame rail, which is kind of frustrating. So before I yank that line out of there, I gotta be real sure. Put all these leaves in here. Gotta be real sure that's what that leak is. And it's really kind of hard to tell. If it is that line, it must be broken on the inside somewhere. Not sure. So I was trying to look in this frame here, and just noticed there was so much crap in there. So I went and made this tool here, just a long piece of 1/8 inch or 3/16 rod. What I can do now is kind of come in here and get all this crap out of the frame. That's looks like dirt. I was thinking it'd be like mowing shavings and stuff like that, but I'm not sure. So I'll do that to the other side too. Can't be good to have all that dirt in there, rusting that out from the inside. It's kind of hard to see, but that frame rail is hollow, and that line goes down the center of that frame rail, and it looks like there's just like a little rubber isolator on the end, but there's nothing really to keep the crap out of there, and also there's nothing to keep that line from chafing back and forth as the machine vibrates. This thing just kind of floats around, and what I'm thinking is somewhere along that run there is a crack or rust. So I'm gonna have to try to get that out. That's a bugger. This line, I don't know if I told you guys or not yet, but this is actually one of the steering lines that goes to the steering in the back of the machine. Oh, well, at least the fluid is the same color as what was dripping. That's a good sign. That's kind of a nice coupler. Hopefully I can reuse the other end as well. So digging through my assortment of old plugs, it does save to save these things, by the way. I found these earplug looking things, and this will work perfect to plug the line, so that way I won't get all kinds of weirdness in that line, because chances are this is going to be apart for quite a while. it's taken already a couple months just to get to this point. You wouldn't believe it, but here in Mid-Coast Maine, it's only 4 o'clock and it's already pitch black outside, so there is the line that I need to get, and it's a little tight, so let's see what we can do. And as you can see there, that's where it goes underneath the frame, into the frame. So this just kind of floats here. Kind of a weird design, but it works. There we go. Nice. It'll actually loosen up for us. Kind of. Alright, so here you can see the connection. It looks to be an O-ring face seal connection. So the O-ring face seal connections are really great because you can just put a new O-ring in there and you got a brand new connection. As long as this thing isn't too rusted on the face where it sits right here. Which this looks pretty good. Oh my goodness. Look at that. Oh, what a mess. Oh, goodness gracious. So, what's happened is, all that crap that was in there has rotted this pipe from the outside. That is a bummer. So we'll have to see. It's actually quite long. It's like 5 feet long. Gonna have to figure out what to do with this. Whether I fix it or just maybe get a new one. We'll have to see. So that needs to be cleaned out, guys. If you have one of these machines, make sure to either blow that out with air or clean that out with something. Because this is what happens. That's too bad. That's a bummer. That's gonna be a hard part to find, I know it. I mean, look at all this crap that's still in there. It's just like, I don't know what it is. It's just a bunch of nonsense. It could have been hay chaff, you know, mowing clippings and stuff like that over the years. Just maybe it turned into this catch-all for other dirt and stuff like that. But wow, what a mess. That's too bad. Probably that's rusted the inside of that frame rail too, but hopefully that'll be good enough to reuse. Alright, so this is the line after it's been removed from the machine. As you can see, it's pretty much a straight piece of 3/8 line, about 60 inches long. But it does have these O-ring face seal connections on the end. Where this thing was sitting in that dirt in that frame rail, it's just completely rotted out. It's really too bad, but... So I'm either going to, depending on price, replace the middle of this thing with a steel line or copper line, whatever I can find, or I'm going to go to the John Deere dealer and see what one of these new lines cost. After a little bit of looking online, I did find a part number for this, and I contacted my local dealer, and they had this to me within 2 days. So I looked at getting a 5-foot length of 3/8 pipe, and between the pipe and the cost of the, you know, the compression unions that you'd use, brass or, you know, pretty much I think they're brass or copper. Either way, they're expensive. Between the tube and the compression unions, it was close to $60. So I figured, you know, for $89.81, this was very much worth it. So this is already pre-bent. It comes, you know, with a nice anodized finish or whatever that finish is. Either way, I'm going to paint that so it's a little more long-lasting. If you want to know what the part number was, it was AM103992. They still have these parts. I couldn't believe it. It's an older machine now. I thought it was going to be next to impossible to find that. So for 80 bucks, I didn't think that was a very bad deal. So, very cool. So let's get this thing painted and get it back on the machine. I just gave this thing a coat of black paint, just as an extra wear protection, I guess. Hoping that this thing will last just a little bit longer than the old one. I probably won't have the machine long enough to ever see this thing rot out, so I think this is overkill, but I wanted to get that done before I installed it. I use this rust shield. That's actually a pretty decent paint. It's high build. Not the best for sunlight resistance, I guess you'd say. It really kind of fades out in the sun, but stuff like this, it works awesome. I know it doesn't look like it, but believe it or not, this is January, and we're having a little bit of a heat wave. It's like mid-40s today. So I'm going to try to work on this machine some, get that line in there, because next week isn't supposed to get much warmer than like 27, I think was the high. So it's hard to work in that kind of weather. I can't bring the machine in the garage because there's no fluid in it, and I don't really want to move it and mess with it just because it's in the way anywhere I put it. So right here is in a good spot. It's not really in the way. Let's get this line in there. I'm going to leave these red caps on the end of this line so that whenever I push this through the frame, oh, that doesn't really want to go. Oh, I guess it's up there. The frame must be wider at the top. Anyway, I left the red cap on there so that it wouldn't fill the line with crap. So there it is, and you can see all the junk that's on that cap. That's a good idea to leave that cap on there. Just going to try to clean these fittings best I can before I put it all back together. Get that cap off of here. Okay, so see the O-ring right in the center of that fitting? Make sure that O-ring is lubricated, and also make sure the O-ring sits in there in the little groove that it's in, because that is the key to making this whole thing seal. I know this is kind of hard to see, but this is very difficult to do. There's not much room here. I'm just trying to get this thing lined up so I'm not really missing a whole lot. I'm trying to do it without wiggling it around too much because that O-ring comes off pretty easy. So this is kind of a bugger. So that fitting was a real pain in the butt to get. As you can see, there's tension on it because the way this thing runs in the frame. Kind of weird. But anyways, I got that one tight. I'll go get the other one done now. Again, the O-ring. O-ring came out. Just gonna make sure these O-rings make their way on that fitting. I know you guys probably can't see too much, but it's very tight tolerances in here. Oh, yeah, that's gonna be tricky. Alright, I'm going to try to take this pick and help clean the threads out on this nut. This is frustrating. Now, this thing has a lot of age. I'm sure it's got its fair share of rust. Well, it's on. Hopefully we don't have any leaks, because that was extremely hard to get that fitting together. For some reason those threads on the nut itself were real rusty, so I couldn't really hold the two pieces together to capture the O-ring in the center, so hopefully we won't have any leaks. That fitting is nice and dry. I just had the machine running. There's not a lot of fluid in this thing, but there's enough fluid to tell if there's a leak or not. Both fittings are nice and dry, so that's exciting. I think that's going to be a long-lasting repair. I'm sure in the future there's going to be another line that goes bad, but for right now, this fitting is nice and dry, and you really can't see it. But here's the underside of that thing looking up. This is all you can see, but then it goes into that frame. It's kind of a weird design, but hey, it works. So I've also gone ahead and put the lift cylinder back in place. that's all together. So when it came time to fill in this thing with fluid, I had no idea how to even know this thing is full or not. So some people online commented on one of my videos, and they said, oh, it's simple, just look at the sight glass, that'll tell you how full it is. So I didn't see a sight glass on this thing, and I looked and I looked and I just couldn't figure it out, so I ended up buying a manual. I'll show you guys that in a second. But long story short, my sight glass is missing. As you can see here, this plug looks like it's been bent, and this thing used to house the sight glass, and the sight glass used to go back to a T and then back to the tank. So obviously I'm missing some pieces here. This thing is all afloat. I'm gonna have to fix this, get that straightened out, and it looks like this thing here, hopefully I can fix this. This nipple is kind of bent, and it looks like it might have stripped the threads in the housing, so let's see what we can do with this thing. You know, I don't know what these people could have hit with this mower, but it's like, how could you not have noticed that you ripped this whole line off and dented this thing? And I'm sure it was leaking fluid because the sight glass has to have fluid up to that level, which is a fair bit higher than this nipple sticks out. So I mean, the thing must have been leaking fluid all over the place. I mean, the stupidity of some people, I don't know how it amazes me still. I should be used to it at this point, but it still amazes me. So I think I can make this piece straight again. Pretty darn good. Should be able to live to see another day. Here you can see the damage on that piece on the end. I just took a drill bit and ran it through to get rid of that burr on the end of that vent plug. For this nipple here, I'm using thread tape and Gasola. I'm hoping that that will correct the damaged threads that are in the gear housing. So I just put this plug in here to stop whatever nonsense might have been trying to get in there, whether it be rain or junk. So anyway, you can see how the plug is angled. Something hit that, or they drove the machine into something whenever the mower deck wasn't on. I don't know what kind of nonsense they would have done. But anyways, that plug is kind of mangled. Now, to correct the threads on this case, there you can see one of the threads that's actually pulled out. I don't really want to run a tap in there. I could, I guess. But I'm worried that if I do that, I'm gonna have to go to the next size bigger. And I don't really want to get shavings and everything in there, metal flake. Because right now, I don't have to take the transmission out. I'm hoping that this will seal. If it can even use the same threads that were damaged, would be good, but we'll see what happens, I guess. This is just aluminum. The casing is just aluminum. It's soft. It's very soft. So I'm hoping that it might just make its own threads and then it will be done. We'll see. This thing, the plug itself is bent. Wanted to get a new plug. They're like $13 through John Deere, so I figured, well, it's not really necessary. Reuse the old one. I don't really want to over tighten that thing because I'm afraid it's going to make things worse. Let's see. Give it a little extra. This is the bracket for the new sight tube. Now, you probably think I'm putting the washer on backwards, the lock washer, but this is how it was whenever I took it off. Not saying that's right or wrong, but it makes sense because that little lock washer locks into the aluminum housing and helps this bracket from moving around. As you can see, that's not even tight, and that kind of locks in the old grooves that were made. So that's kind of a testimony to where this thing used to be before it was damaged. Okay, so the reason I couldn't find the other end of this fitting was because someone had added this hydraulic line. It wasn't a steel line, it was just a regular hydraulic line. And underneath that, surprise, surprise, is the T we're after. That's the other end of the sight glass. And then the other end of that T comes up here to one of these vents. So I took this little vent out because it had all kinds of dirt in here, so I cleaned that out. And I'm gonna go put that back in the machine. I've got another haul of parts here from the John Deere garage. This here is actually a little glass sight tube. It was only, I think it was like $20, which seems like a lot for this, but it's kind of one of those specialty items. And the part number there, M94719. Also, I got some of those small hose clamps. I do have some of the clear line that's supposed to be oil resistant, and I got a hydraulic filter that'll fit that. It's an AM39653. Also, we're going to get rid of the transmission fluid that's in there and get some of this high guard, which, believe it or not, price per quart, this is about the same as ATF, so I just figured I'd rather use this. So I've got 2 gallons of that and all these goodies. I'll get these on and I'll show you what they look like. And just a disclaimer, this is not glass. This is just a piece of, it looks like a polycarbonate pipe. I'm really kind of bummed out about that because I could have found this stuff myself. I was hoping this was going to be glass. So for a $20 piece of plastic, that's really kind of frustrating. So now you got to be really careful with this because if you wipe it with anything, you can scratch it because it's plastic and plastic likes to scratch. So that's kind of obnoxious, but anyway, it is what it is. That's what John Deere recommends for this part, so whatever. Live and learn. So off camera, I actually got this gauge all installed. I'll show you guys the detail on that gauge in the sight glass. So there it is from the side, as you can see. And you can see that hose running back to the T that I just cleaned out. Here we are from the top of the machine. You can see right there the clear hose, and it plugs into the T right there. And then it comes up here to the top of this reservoir. And then this one, I just kind of tucked it in here. I still need to get a little breather vent for the end, but that just kind of makes a loop there. And that pretty much completes the level. Here you can see the detail on that level. What I did was I ended up extending the hose so it goes through this bracket so that it will hold that steady, and that's nice and secure. These clamps fit really nice, so I'm pretty much ready to start. I got to drain the oil out of this reservoir, and that's the drain plug right there for the differential, and then I'll start filling this thing up with new oil. Oh, see all that water that came out of there? I'm certainly glad that I'm doing this. Wow. And that's transmission fluid. That looks nasty. That should be bright red. So anyway, this thing is I can't believe how nasty that is. So glad I've decided to do this. I wasn't going to change this oil. I was just going to top it off, but so I'm happy I drained it. I bet that filter hasn't been off of there in many a year. Oop. Oh man. That's some nasty looking fluid in there. Usually I'll just snug this thing. It doesn't need to be super tight. Usually I'll just snug that just enough. Perfect. I'm left-handed, and I have to write this with my right hand. Let's see how this turns out. 2923. Ah, good enough. So I'm just going to put a little bit of oil in here first, just to see if there's any leaks or anything in my line, or at that fit. I'm mostly worried about the fitting that I put back in that had been broken out. The oil level's going down really slow. I don't know if you can see this here, but there is the fill line right here, and there's a big kink in it, and that's causing the oil to not drain down as it should. Alright, this is my temporary solution. My pliers with a zip tie, just so I can get that oil to go down in the transmission. Before I replace that hose, I'd really kind of want to see if this thing needs anything else, because that looks like it's a little bit of a job to get to. So, and it's quite a steep bend for that big thick hose. This one right here, it's quite a steep bend, so maybe I could reroute that next time I fill this. Okay, so I got 1 gallon of fluid in there, using this High Guard transmission and hydraulic oil, and 1 gallon, I don't know if you can see it or not, but 1 gallon brings the level up this high. So I'm still gonna need probably another ½ gallon to bring the level up this high on the sight glass. Basically what I do is I just fill up this reservoir and let the reservoir just slowly drain, and then I'll come back and fill it again. It takes a little while to fill the transmission this way, but I really don't want to have to replace that hose there quite yet. I want to run the machine and see if there's any other issues before I start tearing back into this thing. Seems like I'm working on this more than I'm using it. The sight glass, as you can see there, has fluid in it almost up to the top. We've got still, though, to run this thing and cycle the transmission fluid, and I'm sure the filter will take up a good amount of fluid. So all in all, I've got 1.5, this is about half empty, 1.5 gallons. So the manual claims for 4.6 quarts, so I'd say that's about accurate. So let's get this thing started and check that sight glass again. All right, guys, so this machine here, this John Deere, battery's getting dead on this one, so let's give it a boost. Oh, let's see, 12 volt. Let's give it, how about a 30 amp? Try that first. All right, guys, so right after I finished that footage, winter hit pretty hard. I mean, we got snowed out for like at least a solid month. So here we are after the snow is pretty much melted. This is April now, so we're back working on this tractor, and I'm going to move this thing for the first time since getting this thing filled up with oil. Quite a whining noise. Not quite sure what's going on there. I'm gonna call that a success, at least for now, until the next thing breaks. So, got a busy mowing season ahead of us. I'm trying to get this thing ready. Like I said, it's April already, so at least the tractor is running and going now. I've got to get the mower deck in the shop and do a few things on this before it's ready to go. Service items and a few places that need some welding. So anyway, we'll get that done. But as far as this thing goes, the pump's a little noisy. I'm not quite sure if that's just because of the fluid that's been changed out or what. Maybe that's timing out too, but the fluid is right in the middle of this window. As you can see, it's starting to turn pink from that ATF that was in there. But I think it's just where it's supposed to be. So this thing is going to be a sweet unit if I can actually use it instead of having to just work on it all the time.